Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tails, your weekly livestock podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harbro, for their continued support. This week on the podcast, I have a fifth-generation rancher from Nebraska, and a rancher, I would say, with a difference there. Jaclyn Wilson, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning. And thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and visiting with you today.
And Jaclyn, you farm with your father in a cow and calf operation there in Sheridan County. Whereabouts in Sheridan County? In Nebraska's huge, right? So it could be, you tell me and I probably wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's on the western part of Nebraska. We're right on the western side of the Nebraska Sandhills. And so in retrospect, I'm about 4.5 hours northeast of Denver, Colorado.
Okay, that puts it in, even I know where Denver is. That puts us in the middle.
Yeah, usually nobody else to know. I mean, if somebody says, what's the closest town? And the closest town's an hour away and has like 5,000 people in it. And so I just get that blank stare, when I say that. So yeah, usually people do know where Denver is or kind of the vicinity. Okay.
And I'm right in thinking some parts of Nebraska are fairly rural there. Is it lakeside you're in there? Is that a metropolis or is that just a small town?
Oh, it's absolutely a thriving metropolis. I think last count it had like 20 people. So, there's a church there. There's a post office and a fire hall, and that's the extent of it. You can't even buy a gallon of milk in Lakeside. So yeah, you blink as you drive through it and wave at the cats.
So let's talk cows. No, first I want to congratulate you. And I said a rancher with a difference, because what's different about you is you've just won the 2023 National Beef Quality Assurance Cow and Calf Producer of the Year out of something like 700,000 beef cow operations in the United States. Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was probably one of the highlights, I think, so far in my dad's and I career, but also one of the most humbling. And now when you look at that, and actually when you say it like that, it's like kind of intimidating. And I go, oh crap, I've got to up my game now.
You certainly have. Yeah, you've got 700,000 beef operators listening to you as you speak. So no, you don't. We don't all genius.
I know. Wow. Shoot, I better not do anything stupid now, right?
Right. And I said, let's talk cows. Roughly how many cows? What's the land like there, should I say? What sort of area are you in? Is this lowland ground, high ground, dry ground? Tell us.
No, so it's actually it's in the Nebraska Sandhills, which is a really unique area. It's the only place topography like it in the entire world. So how I explain it to people is it would be the Sahara if you took it with vegetation. So if you take away the vegetation, it would look like desert dunes. It's just pure sand, no clay, no loam, no rock. But what's really fascinating about it is we sit almost on the deepest part of the Ogallala Aquifer, which stretches from the Dakotas all the way down to Texas. And so there's places that we can dig a post hole and hit water, which is amazing. And then so there's also a lot of surface water because the groundwater is so close to the surface. So we've got a number of lakes on the property too. Okay. Our average rainfall is about 14 inches. Okay. Yeah, you're going to have to do all the conversions for me because I'm miserable at that. but I mean, it's in terms of cattle production, it's one of the, in my opinion, one of the top places in the world to raise cattle because there really isn't a whole lot of other purposes that would benefit from that besides grazing cattle. And the cattle are phenomenal in terms of, compaction on the vegetation. And, if you set up proper rotation management systems and stuff, they thrive in that environment. But they're also, you also really have to be cognizant of fitting those cattle to that environment too, because it can be a harsh environment for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and with a low rainfall like that and sand, there must be a certain type of cattle that it does suit. And what breed are we talking mainly? How many head of cows are we running? How many cattle are and what breed?
My grandfather would always say when somebody asked that, the correct response was enough to eat the grass. And then if people would ask, well, how much grass do you have? Then you go enough to feed the cows. So, but no, we run about anywhere from 700 to 1,000 head of mama cows. We do run long yearlings, and so that's kind of a unique situation for the area, and that's something that we've done for years and years. And the reason that we do that is because we also have a later calving season. Our calving season starts May 1st, and we only do bull exposure for 45 days. And then we also have a fall herd, which came from an old embryo business that I had started. And hopefully, I think the boss man who is my dad, and he's quite ready to get rid of that fall herd. So but it gives us the opportunity to run those long yearlings. And so, yeah, it's we figure about in that area, it's about one pair to anywhere between 15 to 20 acres. And so, the ground quality and health of the vegetation and the plant diversity is extremely important. And so that's what we're probably a little understocked, but by right, when we have drought situations like we've had the last 3 years, we're very fortunate that we usually don't have to sell down numbers. Okay, so it's kind of our saving grace too.
Well, we'll go on to the environmental side of it in a minute, because I know that's something quite dear to you. But when I said what would breed it, would you be Angus there, Black Angus, Red Angus? Does that feature?
Sorry, I'm red. I'm born and bred and multi-generational red. So yep, Red Angus, and then we do have some. We started into some Red Sim composites.
Okay, and breed your own replacements, obviously.
Yep, we do.
Okay, and I'm right in thinking you fatten the rest of them of the cattle. You finish the rest of the cattle yourself, or certainly.
It depends on the year. So we have about 10% or less that go to our direct to consumer business, Flying Diamond Beef, which we sell then all over the U.S. And along with that, it just really depends on the year and the market. So done it all. I mean, I've sold Cell Barn, I've sold Private Treaty, I've retained ownership and finished them out, sold them to the Big Four. It really comes down to the year, what on everything else, the market situation. We're very adaptable. And I think that's one of the benefits that, we take near and dear to us, is to have that adaptability to just adjust depending on where the markets and our situation is at that time.
Okay. And you mentioned that you're Flying Diamond Beef operation. I think that's something that you've very much been involved in yourself. And quite recently, I think you turned to directly marketing your own beef. Probably COVID, like a lot of other people, COVID time. But that takes a lot of setting up and marketing money and getting that exposure. It's not an easy job, is it?
No. The direct side of the business is it's probably one of the most challenging ones, because it sometimes does not really make a lot of sense from a margin perspective, but from having that interaction with consumers is huge. And unlike a lot, we actually started in 2019, right before COVID hit. So COVID pushed us just a little faster, because we already had processing dates lined up and whatnot. And then all of a sudden the world shut down. And so we had to sit, and we did a complete almost 180 from the direction we were heading to, because we were sitting really good for COVID. But since then, we've made a lot of adjustments and changes. I actually started that with 2 other female business partners. And as of the beginning of last year, one unfortunately passed away in an ATV accident. And the other one, we took it over in the beginning of last year, and we're able to base it now completely off the ranch. So we have freezer storage directly on the ranch. And so we're able to ship and everything right there from the ranch, which has been a huge benefit for us.
So you're killing your own cattle on the ranch as well, or do they go to an abattoir?
No, we're going to abattoir. And when we had started the business, it was actually, abattoir was 18 hours away round trip. And so it was down in southwest Colorado over 2 mountain ranges and through 2 large cities. And so by the time I would truck cattle down there or go pick up meat, it was exhausting. But then they opened up a new USDA plant about 3 hours away from the ranch. And we've had a phenomenal partnership with them. And so, yeah, that's really has propelled the business too, is just having something that's not 18 hours away, and more convenient for sure, is huge.
But one thing you have done, which I've noticed, and I wouldn't say uniquely, but you certainly stepped out in front of the pack there by marketing or labeling your beef as environmental. And as I said, from the you mentioned yourself the area that you're on where nothing else could thrive but the cattle you've got, then already you're making an environmental impact. That's a smart move though, wasn't it? And tell me a bit more about your EnviroSmart beef.
Sure. So our EnviroSmart beef is our new product line that we released on Earth Day on April 22nd of this year. What's the idea from EnviroSmart beef actually came from the UK. Well, actually came from both the EU and the UK from when I was traveling over there this last fall. I was there multiple times on trade missions. I was actually in Brussels, speaking with DG Agra on behalf of the USDA in December, talking about producers' input and whatnot. And one of the things that I really discovered, especially overseas, is that there's such a focus on climate. You know, from a consumer perspective, everyone is so focused on climate. And sometimes when we get so focused on environmental issues, we lose sight of reason. You know,
amen to that one.
Right. And so when we start doing that, a lot of times when we start losing sight of reason, we also lose sight of efficiencies. And so some of the great things that we have for efficiencies in the U.S. beef supply chains is things like growth promotants, our concentrated animal feed lean operations, or our feedlots, you know, or some of those things that actually can get that animal to harvest faster, which in turn has less carbon footprint. And so our thought process behind EnviroSmart Beef is we wanted to take three components that we're really passionate about, which is human well-being, environmental well-being, and animal well-being, and combine those, which is something that we do on a day-to-day basis on our operation, but I don't think we've ever actually given it a name. And so we thought, okay, well, let's give it a name, but then let's push it just one step further. So now we have a label, the EnviroSmart Beef label, and that actually goes only on the packages of beef that are genomic tested through Neogen's Identity Feeder program. And that genomic test gives us markers back that will, along with a couple other input data, like weight going into a finishing operation and also the ration, we can get the ideal number of days on feed for that animal to reach its optimal carcass quality. What we found out when I first got the first set of data back is I was actually overfeeding cattle by about 30 days.
Okay.
And so before I had started, you know, before that, my finish weight was 1,550 pounds, you know, so a little over 700 kilos. And all of a sudden, you know, I'm realizing that I can reach that optimal at 1,400 and some. So instead, if I take that cattle off of feed 30 days sooner, I'm going to have a lot less carbon imprint. And so that's kind of the thought process behind the EnviroSmart Beef. And so we wanted to also just compare it side by side with what we call our classic line and see what the consumers thought. And since Earth Day, about 80% of our orders have gone to the EnviroSmart line.
Right.
So in retrospect, we're really all we're doing is adding one DNA test, you know, for under $30. And in retrospect, we're adding about $500 additional carcass value. So it's been a huge game changer for us. But it's really doing nothing different than what we've done before. We're just letting consumers know that, hey, we've been doing these things for years. This is what we're about. But we're actually putting it into a little bit better perspective, I think.
Yeah, that is a fantastic figure, a mind-blowing figure that you just mentioned there. And is there a benchmark? Some of these animals make this grade and some of them don't, or is it just the ones you put the label on because that's what people are demanding?
Well, at this point, we're heading more of our cattle towards that label. Actually, everything I have on feed right now would qualify for that label. And you know, I think it's going to be just selecting those when we get that data back, just selecting those that might be in that upper tier of that label, because there's some of them that, you know, they're going to take a little bit longer on feed. And so now it's just a matter of kind of of getting a really good look at where that data says, how we can gauge it with our processing dates, and just working on even every day, just trying to make our beef just a little bit better and a little bit more efficient. And if we can do that, then I feel that we're on the right track. But it's just constantly taking the data now and continuing to tweak it, and just continuing to analyze what the consumer response is going to be.
Okay, and is you mentioned earlier on, I mentioned it as well, I think that the fact that you're on the Sandhills there, which is an area where nothing else will grow, that obviously does contribute towards your carbon footprint. Is that something that you market as well, to say, well, you know, we're actually, you know, this is land that couldn't do anything else, so we've got cows on it?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the marketing, but I think, you know, at the end of the day, so many people don't realize that cattle spend the majority of their life in our operation on pasture. And so, you know, we get this such a great push for grass-fed, and we promote grass-fed and grain-finished because we really want that extra marbling, that extra flavor, that extra eating experience at the end. But it's just a matter of informing consumers how that works. So once I tell a consumer, that no, this animal spends the majority of its life on pasture, and then maybe for the last 90 to 120 days, it's in a feeding facility, then all of a sudden they have a different impression of what the beef industry looks like. And that's almost more of the norm in the US than it is to just have them in a constant feeding facility all the time, or a confinement facility. And so it's just literally informing the consumers and letting them know, hey, this is what our focus is. This is what place looks like. It's 15,000 acres of where you can't find any litter at all, minus the stray balloon that people release here or there that shows up on the property. And otherwise, this is how cattle should be living their lives. And if we can take that and share that story with the consumer, I feel at the end of the day, we're hopefully educating them, and they're going to continue to eat some kind of protein and some kind of animal protein.
That's brilliant. And it is about the education, isn't it? And it's a constant battle with all of us in the red meat sector to try and counter those that are against the red meat sector. But you have to get column inches, you have to get yourself out there, you have to get your marketing done, and that all costs money, and it takes a lot of time as well, Jaclyn. So how do you manage that? I mean, how do you what's your advice to other people who want to start in this online business? How do they get out there and get some market share?
Well, I think the biggest thing they have to do is they have to be open. And one of the things that I have found out is I will not engage with activists. If they, I mean, I've fortunately been pretty lucky in terms of keeping them off our social media and whatnot. But at the same time, if there is one that starts to engage, the very first step I'll do is I'll invite them out to the operation, which is gutsy. And not a single one has ever took me up on it, but it seems to shut that conversation off right away. And then it's just a matter of, looking at what your resources is, looking at what you want to do in terms of the direction of your operation, and realizing, where does this fit? If it doesn't fit into the operation, don't do it. I mean, it's that simple. It has to fit into kind of what you're currently direction you want to be. Direct to consumer programs, they do take a lot of work. They do take a lot of social interaction and that marketing and advertising and getting that story out, which all of a sudden you might realize, something that you've done for years, like maybe a certain way that you work cattle, or a certain way you pull calves, or a certain way, you do any of your operation is going to be judged, and you have to be willing and accepting to get that criticism back. And I think what it does is it's made me a better producer. Okay. Because, before I was always looking at animals from the skin in, and now I'm looking at them from the meat out. And if I can do that and share, what I'm learning and those experience I'm gaining with not only other consumers, but other producers, I think it only in turn makes the industry more successful in general.
Sure. Brilliant. And let's move on to some of your other appointments there, and one that obviously gives you that interaction with other producers. You're on the board of the National Cattle Breeders Association, and that's pretty special, isn't it? I mean, it's you chair the International Trade Committee, is that right, Jaclyn?
It is correct, yes.
And what does that entail?
Yep. So International Trade Committee does a lot of setting policy for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association in terms of not only trade policy, but things like country of origin labeling falls within our trade committee. Any current or future negotiable trade policies, like dealing with NAFTA or any WTO stuff or anything, we do have policy on those. And so as chairing that committee, both at our summer business meeting and then our annual convention, we provide members the opportunity to bring thought processes on policy that they want to pass that will make, the industry in general a better. And so it's been really fascinating and really neat in terms of being able to be at the grassroots of that policy development. And I think it's important, at the end of the day, we need to have people engaged and involved on both local, state, and national levels, because if you don't have that involvement, the industry becomes stagnant. And at the same time, producers need to have a voice. And this is my way of I feel not only getting my voice heard, but having it so I can share that voice with other producers and make sure that I get their input and their concerns and thoughts too.
Sure, and that obviously, by the nature of the word international, that gets you to travel. And you mentioned you were in the UK and Europe last year, and of course, this being a UK-based podcast, there's been a few heated discussions amongst the British beef producers that US beef is going to flood our markets and the different type of beef. And how's that lot going?
Yeah, those are interesting discussions. We actually hosted a group from the UK here just this month.
Okay.
And so there's and what was even more surprising is I think there was 5 of them, and I knew 4 of the 5 of them because I had been to either their operations or have interacted with them over the years. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there for both countries, and it's just being able to find that common ground for sure. And I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing from traveling internationally and visiting with other producers, like I'm actually doing this podcast. I'm in Nassau, Bahamas right now at the West Indies Ag Conference, and it doesn't seem to matter where you're at. The producer topics are very similar. They're concerned about succession, they're concerned about economics, and they're concerned about consumer perceptions. And also regulatory control. And so it doesn't matter if you're in the Bahamas or if you're in the UK or in the US or Australia, New Zealand, these are almost always identical producer concerns. And so it's just being able to make sure that those producers have a voice and are, whether it be talking about regulations with Parliament. We had the opportunity to meet the Prime Minister here in the Bahamas and having those conversations that, hey, the U.S. supports your producers just like they support our producers in the U.S., but you have to be able to let them produce. Okay. And if you don't let them produce, you're not going to have an ag industry.
Sure. Well, there we go. That's kind of wrapped up that subject pretty succinctly. And you mentioned that you get to travel, Jaclyn, and we've got a mutual acquaintance in PJ Buddle, who's again been on this podcast recently, who gets out there and not quite sure what PJ does. He tires me out just thinking about him. He's some man. He's everywhere and does a lot of judging. Knows a lot of things, doesn't he?
Yeah, PJ's an impressive individual for sure. Yeah, he actually was the one that got me hooked up here in the Bahamas on this conference, and I think he zoomed in one day and was off traveling the world again. But yeah, and I think the thing I really appreciate about PJ is that we have a passion in helping other producers, and sometimes I think it's rare for people that are completely selfless in their thought process, but they do really want to make the industry better. And, and that's something I'm continuing to learn more and more from him. And I really appreciate that friendship for sure.
Okay. No, good. Well, I certainly appreciate him putting you in touch with me as well, which he did. And something else that you're involved is the Trailblazers class. I'll say that one more time. The Trailblazers class. Can you explain what that's about?
Sure, that was actually the inaugural. That was sponsored on behalf of the National Beef Checkoff, and what it was is they took in a lot of they had a big application program that they brought in influencers in the beef industry and taught them a whole other level of training in terms of media, in terms of interaction, in terms of how to promote beef as a healthy protein source, how to better your social media, how to do interviews, and they've really utilized. It's the second year now in the program. They've got a new class in there. And what their hope is that the more that they can educate, especially younger adults, to share that story, get out in the countryside, talk to producers, talk to consumers, plaster it all over social media, I think that bigger, stronger base you can build in general. And that was the whole point of the program. It is sponsored on behalf of the Beef Checkoff. And so that was something that was really exciting to be a part of. And now it's just continuing to take that and get that message out that, hey, beef is awesome. Everybody loves a nice juicy steak, right? Or I should say not everybody, but we hope in the future everybody continues to love a nice juicy steak.
No, excellent. And that's something, obviously, it's you putting a little bit back into the industry. And I know you serve on the Nebraska's Humanitarians Council as well, and get your hands involved in all sorts of things where you can make a difference, Jaclyn.
Yeah, and that's something that's really, I think, important is I've kind of gone the gamut on the ag side of things, and now it's really been neat to get involved into other groups that don't necessarily have that ag presence, because I think that's almost just as important, And so on for instance, Nebraska Humanities Council, there's 2 of us now on the board of 40 that that work full time in ag. And so just being able to share some of the things that are going on, Nebraska is a dominant ag state. I mean, that's our largest industry. But, from a representation standpoint, sometimes we don't have that representation from ag. And so, yeah, things like that are important. Does it take away some time from the ranch? Yes, it does. But, my dad and I are partners in our operation. He's also my best friend. And he's really he really understands the importance of getting out there, because there's so many great things that come out of some of these conferences and stuff that actually not only affect our operation, but affect the industry. And we just have to get out there and share it for sure.
Sure, and you don't know until you try and do get in amongst that, don't you? And you're a writer as well in your spare time, as I am, and an award-winning writer. I think I'm not sure I'm one of those, but yeah, you write for journals and do you write books, or what do you spend your time?
Oh heck no! Well, come on, Andy. When am I gonna have time to write a freaking book? No.
I've written 41 of them. I don't know how.
Oh, that's impressive. I know. People keep saying you should write a book, but I only time I've tried it, I've started one a couple times and it ends up being way too many cuss words. Exactly. I started writing about a decade ago and it just took off.
You write for a magazine then, I guess?
A weekly ag newspaper called Midwest Messenger.
Okay.
And
do you write about what goes on at the farm, or I mean, I write for a newspaper as well, but I'm normally far too controversial for it to be printed to a larger audience. Is it just what you write about your own life, or is it prophecy that you put down there, and who reads this?
Oh, there's a little bit of everything. So, some weeks it's about what's going on the operation. Some weeks it's about, philosophical things. Some weeks it's about mental health and agriculture. It goes out to about 75,000 producers throughout the Midwest.
Okay.
And so it's got a really solid reader base. And yeah, it's been interesting. It's caused, there's been some really great things that have come out of it. And every week I continue to be like, oh, why am I still doing this? And then, you'll have a reader that reaches out, and then you're like, okay, this is why. So yeah, it's been a blast.
Okay, good for you. That's a big circulation as well. And I know you were featured in a book as well called Generations on the Land, and I've looked at that, and a lot of references to Aldo Leopold, a 1930s conservationist writer, I think. And now there's a Leopold Award for conservation. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, there has, and they're continuing to expand the number of states too that are doing the annual Leopold Award. So I think it really, and it's all across all sectors of the industry. So I know there's also some, vineyards that have got it, dairy industry people have got it. So I think they're doing a really good job of focusing on conservation and agriculture in general, and hopefully it's a program that will continue to grow.
Okay, and obviously the conservation on our side of the pond involves everybody planting more and more trees and hoping for the best. Are you getting some of that there? I suppose you can't plant trees on that sandy land, or don't want to?
We actually planted 1,100 trees 2 weeks ago. My crew was ready to hurt me. So we attempt, I should say it's an attempt to plant trees, because unfortunately between the wildlife and Mother Nature, it never works out very well, but we always attempt at least. Okay. So it's the thought that counts.
Yeah, there's always something there. You want to eat them as soon as you put them in there. Well, Jaclyn, you sound like a really busy person, and you are. I know it's for all you might be having half a day off in the Bahamas. I'm sure you've got talks and things to give later on, and stuff to handle back home. So I really appreciate you taking your time to talk to Top Lines and Tails.
Thanks, Andy. It's been great. It's been a blast.
And I'm impressed with, obviously, you winning the cow-calf producer of the year for 2023 for the whole of the USA. Fantastic achievement. And also with your EnviroSmart beef thing. That sounds like a real benchmark there for other people to follow as well. So wish you best of luck with that one.
Thanks. Now we just need to get it over into the EU, right?
Maybe, can you tell me where we can look this up? Maybe just shout out for a website there where we can do the Flying Diamond Beef Ranch. Is that right?
Yep. FlyingDiamond.com.
FlyingDiamond.com. Okay, no, we'll give that a look. Well, Jaclyn, thanks very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Sounds great. Thanks, Andy.
Cheers now. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Top Lines and Tails, your weekly livestock podcast. And as always, we're extremely grateful to our sponsors and partners, Harborough. And if you're looking to get your pedigree stock ready for this summer's shows, then get in touch with Harborough to find out what their feeds can do for you. Because don't forget that Harborough was founded on top quality feed for show sheep a long time ago, and their range of products still feeds a lot of the top show animals in the country today. And so find out a little bit more about Harborough on the internet, or contact your local representative. And while you're on the internet, don't forget to look at our Facebook page and maybe join our Facebook group there, Top Lines and Tails, where you can join in with the community and find some pictures to back up this and previous episodes. And also, if you get chance, when you're listening to the podcast, please click the button that says follow, because if you click that follow button, then you'll be pre-warned whenever a new episode of the Top Lines and Tails podcast comes out.